Welcome to the Artificial Fluency Podcast. I'm Emma. Before we begin, let me ask you a few questions. Have you ever spent a day in the countryside? What did you do there? How did it feel to be away from the busy city? Try to answer these questions in your mind as you listen today. In this episode, we will hear a real-life story about a trip to the countryside. While listening, you will improve your listening skills by focusing on natural English. And you'll also improve your writing because you can try to describe the story in your own words after listening. If you're new here, welcome. On this channel, the English Pod community, we upload videos every day to help you improve your English. So press the like button and stay with us to learn real English from real stories. Let's begin with today's story. Last weekend, I visited a small village called Greenhill with my wife. We wanted to take a break from the noisy city and spend some quiet time in nature. The village was about 2 hours away from our home. The drive was peaceful. We passed green fields, small rivers, and even a few cows walking near the road. When we reached the village, the air felt fresh and cool. It was quiet. No traffic, no loud sounds, just the wind and the birds. We stayed at a small guest house run by a man named Mr. Thomas. He was around 60 years old and had lived in Greenhill all his life. He welcomed us with a warm smile and offered us fresh apple juice from his own farm. I had never tasted anything so fresh before. It was sweet, cold, and perfect after the long drive. Later, we went for a walk through the fields. My wife pointed out different plants and flowers. She loves gardening, so she was excited to see wild herbs growing naturally. At one point, we met an old lady named Mrs. Clara who was collecting firewood. She smiled and said, "You two must be from the city. You walk too fast." That made us laugh. It's true. In the city, we walk quickly and always look at our phones. But in the countryside, everything is slower. People take their time. They enjoy the moment. In the evening, Mr. Thomas invited us to have dinner with his family. They served us rice, lentils, fresh vegetables, and homemade bread. It reminded me of my childhood when my mother used to cook simple but delicious meals. After dinner, we sat outside under the stars. There were no street lights, so we could see the night sky clearly. It was beautiful. I had forgotten how peaceful silence could be. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of birds and a rooster. I felt rested and calm. Before we left, Mr. Thomas gave us a small basket of apples to take home. He said, "Take these as a gift from the village." That simple sentence touched me. It reminded me that kindness doesn't need to be big. Even small things can mean a lot. Now, think about this. Have you ever visited a village or the countryside? What did you see, hear, and feel? How was it different from your daily life? Would you like to go back again someday? Try to answer these in your notebook. You can also write a short paragraph about your own countryside experience, or imagine one if you've never been. This will help improve your writing and thinking in English. The next day, after we said goodbye to Mr. Thomas and Mrs. Clara, we took a long walk around the village. It was peaceful. The streets were so quiet that we could hear the wind blowing through the trees. We passed small houses with gardens full of flowers and vegetables. Some of the villagers were sitting outside, chatting with each other. One of the things I noticed about the countryside was how everyone seemed to know each other. In the city, we don't always speak to our neighbors. But in the village, people greet each other every morning. It felt warm and friendly. It reminded me of when I was a child, and everyone in my neighborhood knew each other. We also visited a small lake near the village. The water was clear, and there were ducks swimming happily. We sat by the shore and watched them for a while. It was nice to just sit and relax without feeling rushed. During our time in Greenhill, I also realized how much I had missed nature. I live in a busy city, and sometimes we forget how important it is to connect with the natural world. Being surrounded by trees, fields, and animals made me feel more calm and at peace. Later, we decided to try a local tradition. There's a festival in Greenhill every year where people celebrate the harvest. This time, the festival was a few days away, but we were lucky enough to see some early preparations. Villagers were decorating the streets with flowers and hanging lights. It looked beautiful, and everyone seemed excited. My wife, Sarah, was especially excited about the food. She loves trying new dishes, and the village was known for its homemade cheese and fresh bread. We visited a small shop run by a friendly woman named Linda, who made the cheese herself. We bought a piece, and Sarah couldn't wait to try it. That night, we stayed in a cozy little cabin just outside the village. It was simple, but it had everything we needed. The air was so fresh that we kept the windows open all night. I remember waking up in the middle of the night to the sound of an owl hooting nearby. It was a peaceful sound. The next morning, we were ready to leave. We packed our bags and said goodbye to the village. As we drove back to the city, I couldn't help but feel grateful for the time we spent there. It had been a short trip, but it was exactly what we needed. Now I want you to think for a moment. When was the last time you spent time in nature? What did you do? How did it make you feel? Try to describe it in English. What kind of natural surroundings do you like? Do you prefer the mountains, the beach, or the countryside? Try to write a few sentences about your experience. This will help you practice your English writing skills and also help you express yourself in more detail. What would your perfect trip to the countryside look like? Would you go hiking, visit a small village, or maybe just relax by a lake? Think about the details. What would you see, hear, and do? Write down your thoughts in English. As we continued our time in Green Hill, something special happened. Mr. Thomas told us about his neighbor, David, who owned a small piece of farmland just outside the village. David was in his early 50s, friendly, with a kind face and a calm voice. He invited us to visit his farm, and we happily agreed. We followed a narrow path that led to his land. Along the way, we saw chickens walking freely and a few goats, resting under a tree. The sun was shining, but it wasn't too hot. The air smelled fresh, like grass and flowers. When we reached the farm, David was already waiting for us. He waved and said, "Welcome to my little world." David showed us around. He had apple trees, rows of carrots, tomatoes, and even some pumpkins growing. He explained how he takes care of the plants every day, waking up before sunrise and working until late afternoon. He told us that life on a farm is not easy, but it's honest work. He said, "The land gives you what you give it. If you take care of it, it will take care of you." We helped him water the plants for a while. It wasn't hard, but it made me think about how much time and care farmers put into their work. We also helped him collect eggs from the chicken coop. My wife Sarah was nervous at first because she had never done that before, but David guided her step by step. She smiled when she held a warm egg in her hand for the first time. After the farm visit, David invited us to sit under a big tree near the edge of the field. He brought out a basket with homemade bread, some cheese, and boiled eggs. We sat on a blanket and had a simple countryside lunch. It was quiet. We could hear the wind in the leaves and birds singing in the distance. David told us stories about his childhood. He had grown up in Green Hill and had never left. He said, "Some people like big cities, tall buildings, and busy streets. But me? I like to wake up with the sound of birds and go to sleep with the stars above." His words were simple, but they stayed in my mind. Later that day, we visited a small shop in the village center. It was run by a man named Edward, who made wooden tools and furniture. He showed us how he carved a piece of wood into a spoon. He used only a knife in his hands. Every movement was slow and careful. "It takes time," he said, "but when it's finished, you know it's made with care." Edward told us he had learned this skill from his father and now teaches it to his own son. I could see how proud he was of his work. I picked up one of his handmade chairs and it felt strong and smooth. He said, "Things made by hand carry the spirit of the person who made them." That evening, we joined a small group of villagers who were sitting near the community well. They were talking, sharing stories, and laughing together. An old man named Mr. Henry shared a story about how he once got lost in the forest when he was a boy and how a dog led him back to the village. Everyone laughed, and one of the younger boys asked, "Is that really true?" Mr. Henry just smiled and said, "Maybe." The moment was so special. No one was looking at a phone. No one was rushing. People were just present, enjoying each other's company. That's something I rarely see in the city. There, everyone is in a hurry, always looking at the clock. But in Green Hill, time moved slowly and every moment mattered. Before going to bed, Sarah and I sat on the porch of the guest house. We watched the stars again. It was our last night there. She said, "I feel like I can breathe better here. Life is so peaceful." I nodded. I felt the same way. Being away from noise, stress, and crowds helped me think clearly. It helped me appreciate the little things: fresh air, quiet nights, friendly people, and honest work. Now, I want you to imagine something. Imagine you are standing in a quiet village. You can hear the birds, feel the wind, and smell the fresh bread from a nearby house. What would you do? Who would you speak to? Would you go for a walk or help a farmer in the field? Would you sit near a lake or talk to an old man like Mr. Henry? Try to describe your own countryside trip. Use easy English. Write about what you saw, what you ate, and how you felt. This will help you think in English and improve your writing skills. Also, when you listen to a real story like this one, try to focus on how words are used. Listen for verbs, adjectives, and simple phrases. Repeat them. Try to use them in your own sentences. For example, the air felt fresh. The village was quiet. People were kind and friendly. We sat under a tree. These kinds of simple sentences are very powerful. They help you speak clearly and naturally in English. The next morning in Greenhill, something special happened. It wasn't big or loud, but it stayed in my memory clearly. After breakfast, Mr. Thomas invited us to help on his farm. At first, I was a little unsure. I had never worked on a farm before, but I thought, why not? It could be a good experience. Sarah smiled and said, "Let's do it. It sounds fun." So we changed into some old clothes that Mr. Thomas gave us. They were a bit big, but we didn't mind. He handed us each a pair of gloves and led us out to the field. The sun was already shining, but the morning air was still cool. You could hear birds chirping and the gentle sound of the wind moving through the grass. Mr. Thomas's farm was peaceful and full of life. There were rows of vegetables: carrots, potatoes, tomatoes, and onions. He showed us how to gently pull the carrots out of the ground and shake off the dirt. It was actually kind of fun. The soil was soft, and the carrots were big and orange. Sarah pulled one up and laughed. "Look at this one. It has 2 legs." We all laughed together. Then we moved on to picking tomatoes. Mr. Thomas said, "Pick the ones that are red and firm, not soft. Those are ready." It was a slow, steady job, but very calming. The fresh smell of the plants, the sunshine on our backs, and the kind words from Mr. Thomas made it a really relaxing time. After about an hour, we took a short break under a tree. Mrs. Thomas came out with cold lemonade and homemade cookies. They were sweet and buttery, with a little bit of cinnamon. We sat on a bench, sipping our drinks, looking out over the fields. Sarah leaned over to me and said, "I wish every day could feel this quiet." Later, Mr. Thomas showed us the chicken coop. There were about 20 chickens inside. He opened the small door and said, "Want to try collecting some eggs?" I wasn't sure at first, but he showed me how to reach into the straw and gently pick up the eggs without scaring the chickens. We each filled a small basket with fresh brown eggs. It felt so different from buying eggs at the store. Here, you could see where the food came from. After lunch, we decided to visit a nearby river. The river was just a short walk from the farm, and the path was lined with trees. It was quiet, and the only sound was the flowing water. When we arrived, we sat on the rocks near the edge and took off our shoes. The water was cool and refreshing. I dipped my feet in, and Sarah did the same. A boy named David came by with his dog, Max. He smiled and said, "This is the best place to cool down. Max loves swimming here." The dog jumped into the river and splashed around happily. We talked with David for a while. He was about 15 and said he helped his parents on their farm every weekend. He told us stories about fishing with his grandfather and catching frogs with his cousins. His stories were simple but full of joy. It reminded me of my own childhood, playing outside for hours without phones or screens. We asked David if he knew any good places to hike nearby. He pointed to a small hill across the river and said, "There's an old tree up there. People say it's over 100 years old. It's a nice spot to sit and see the sunset." We thanked him and decided to try it out. The hike wasn't too long, but it was a bit steep. As we climbed, I looked back and saw the whole village getting smaller behind us. You could see the farms, the little houses, and the church tower in the middle of the village. It was like a painting. When we reached the top, we saw the tree. It was big with strong branches and a thick trunk. Its leaves made a wide shadow, and we sat under it to rest. We watched the sun go down slowly. The sky turned orange, pink, and then deep purple. Sarah whispered, "It's like time has stopped." We didn't say much after that. We just sat in silence, listening to the wind in the leaves and watching the sky change color. As we walked back to the guest house in the dark, we used a small flashlight to see the path. The village was quiet. No loud cars, no traffic, no city noise, just peace. When we reached the guest house, Mr. Thomas met us at the door. He said, "You two look like you had a full day." We smiled and nodded. The next day was our last in Greenhill, so we wanted to do something special. We woke up early and visited the small village school. It was a one-room building, and the teacher, Mrs. Parker, was already there preparing her lessons. She welcomed us and said, "Would you like to meet the students? They love visitors." We agreed, and a few minutes later, about 10 children came into the room. They were between 6 and 10 years old, full of energy and curiosity. Mrs. Parker asked us to talk a little about our life in the city. I told them about my job, the tall buildings, and how busy the streets are. Sarah talked about working from home and taking care of the garden on weekends. Then the children asked questions. One girl named Emily asked, "Do you have cows in your city?" I laughed and said, "No, not really, but I saw some here yesterday." A boy named Ben asked, "Is it noisy in your city?" I said, "Very noisy. That's why I love the quiet here so much." We played a few games with the kids and helped them with a drawing activity. They were drawing pictures of their favorite places. Some drew the river, others the farms, or the big tree on the hill. I noticed one boy drew a picture of his family having dinner at home. I asked him about it, and he said, "We eat together every night. It's the best part of my day." Hearing that made me think. In the city, it's easy to forget these small but important moments. Eating together, playing outside, talking face to face. These things bring real happiness. Before we left, the children gave us a handmade thank you card. It said, "Thank you for visiting our school. Please come back again." It was a simple card, but it meant a lot. I put it carefully in my bag so I wouldn't lose it. That afternoon, we walked through the village one last time. We said goodbye to George at the shop, waved to David and Max near the river, and stopped by the cafe to thank Mark and Helen for their warm coffee and kind words. Everyone seemed to smile and say, "Come back soon." That evening, as I packed my bag, I thought about everything we had done. The fresh air, the people, the peaceful life, the animals, the school children, and even the vegetables we picked. It wasn't just a holiday. It was a chance to live differently, to slow down, and to see life in a new way. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever visited the countryside? What did you do there? What sounds did you hear? What kind of people did you meet? If you haven't visited yet, can you imagine what it would be like? Use your English to describe it. You don't need big words. Just share what you see in your mind. The next day, we decided to take a different kind of adventure. Instead of working on the farm or walking through the village, Mr. Thomas suggested we explore the nearby forest. Sarah and I were excited. The forest was known for its tall trees and peaceful atmosphere. Mr. Thomas said it was his favorite place to visit when he wanted to clear his mind. We started early in the morning. The weather was perfect, cool with a light breeze. As we walked along the dirt path, the trees around us grew taller and thicker. The sunlight barely reached the ground through the thick canopy above. It was like stepping into another world. The air smelled fresh, full of earth and leaves. And it was so quiet. The only sounds were the crunch of the leaves beneath our feet and the occasional birds singing high up in the trees. Mr. Thomas pointed out different plants and trees along the way. He told us that the forest was full of history. Some of the trees were hundreds of years old. He said that during the winter, the forest would be covered in snow, and it looked like something out of a fairy tale. He also mentioned that many people in the village came here to find peace and clear their minds. Sarah and I were happy to be a part of it. As we continued walking, we came across a small stream. The water was clear and flowed gently over smooth rocks. It made a soft, soothing sound. We stopped for a moment to rest and listen. Mr. Thomas said, "This is where I like to come and think. You can sit by the water and listen to the sounds of nature. It's very relaxing." We sat on some large rocks next to the stream and closed our eyes for a few minutes, just taking in the peace of the forest. The cool air, the sound of the water, and the quiet surroundings made everything feel calm. It was a nice change from the busy, noisy world we were used to. After a while, we continued walking along the path. The trees seemed to get even taller as we went deeper into the forest. Mr. Thomas told us about the wildlife in the area. He mentioned deer, rabbits, and even wild boars that lived in the forest. He also said that sometimes people would see foxes or squirrels jumping from tree to tree. We didn't see any animals that day, but it was still exciting to know they were out there somewhere. At one point, we reached a clearing in the forest. In the middle of the clearing was a huge, ancient oak tree. It was the biggest tree I had ever seen. Its trunk was thick, and its branches spread out wide, almost as if they were trying to touch the sky. Mr. Thomas said this was a special tree. He called it the heart of the forest. People from the village would come here sometimes to sit and think or even have small celebrations. Sarah was fascinated by the tree. She walked around it, touching the rough bark and looking up at the branches. She said, "It's so big. I feel like it has its own story to tell." I agreed. The tree seemed old, wise, and full of secrets. I couldn't help but think about how many years it had stood there, watching everything around it change. Mr. Thomas told us that the tree had been there for more than 300 years. And in all that time, it had seen the village grow, the people come and go, and the world change in so many ways. We spent some time there, just sitting and enjoying the quiet. Mr. Thomas shared a story with us about his grandfather, who used to bring him to this spot when he was a boy. He said his grandfather believed the tree had a kind of magic to it. If you sat quietly and made a wish, the tree would grant it. Of course, Mr. Thomas wasn't sure if that was true, but he said it always made him feel good to sit under the tree and think about the future. It was amazing how much history was packed into that one place. It felt like time had stopped in the forest. There was no rush, no deadline, just the beauty of nature and the quiet of the woods. As we left the clearing and headed back to the village, we talked about how different life felt in Greenhill. In the city, everything was fast-paced. People were always in a hurry. But here, people took their time. They took care of their land, spent time with their families, and made time for the things that really mattered. I thought about my own life back home and how often I rushed through things. It made me wonder if I should slow down sometimes and focus on the small moments. That evening, we returned to the guest house and shared our experiences with Mr. and Mrs. Thomas. They were curious about our trip to the forest and loved hearing our stories. We told them about the big oak tree and how peaceful it was by the stream. Mrs. Thomas smiled and said, "You two have experienced something special. Not everyone gets to enjoy the forest in such a peaceful way." After dinner, we went outside to look at the stars. The sky was clear and the stars were bright. We lay on the grass for a while, just staring up at the sky. It was a perfect ending to a perfect day. As we lay there, I thought about all the things we had seen and done in Greenhill. It wasn't a place full of excitement or big events, but it was full of simple pleasures. Spending time with the Thomases, working on the farm, walking in the forest, and just enjoying nature. These were the things that made the trip memorable. And now, I want to ask you, what about you? Do you enjoy spending time in nature? Do you like hiking, walking by a stream, or simply sitting under a big tree? Imagine you are in the countryside right now. Can you describe what you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? Take a moment to picture it and try to use your English to explain it. You don't need to know all the words. Just focus on describing the things that matter to you. This is how you can practice speaking and writing English by sharing the small details of your life. The more you describe, the better you will get at using English to tell your own stories. Now, if you want to, you can close your eyes for a moment and think about your own ideal trip to the countryside. What would you do? What would you see? Try to use your imagination to practice your English. You could even write it down later, or tell a friend about it. The next morning, Sarah and I woke up early, feeling refreshed after a peaceful night's sleep. We could hear birds chirping outside the window and the sound of leaves rustling in the breeze. It was a beautiful day, and we were both excited to see more of Greenhill. Over breakfast, Mr. and Mrs. Thomas shared some ideas for the day. They mentioned taking a walk through the village and visiting some of the local spots, including the old chapel and the village market. It was clear that there was a lot to discover in this small, peaceful place. After breakfast, we put on our shoes and headed outside ready to explore. We started walking down the narrow road that led into the village. The houses were made of stone, with ivy climbing up the walls, and the gardens were full of flowers in every color. The air smelled fresh and clean, filled with the scent of flowers, grass, and the earth. The road was quiet, with only the sound of birds and the occasional passing car. As we walked, Mr. Thomas pointed out different places of interest. He told us that Greenhill had a long history. The village had been around for hundreds of years, and the people here took great pride in their traditions. He mentioned the local church, which had been built in the 1600s, and how it was a place where many important events in the village had taken place. We stopped for a moment to admire the church. It had tall stone walls and a beautiful bell tower that could be seen from almost anywhere in the village. Next, we walked to the village market, where many of the locals sold fresh produce, handmade, goods, and homemade baked items. It was a small market, but it was full of life and color. The stands were packed with fresh vegetables, fruits, and flowers. There was a stall selling homemade bread and pastries, and the smell was so delicious that we couldn't resist buying a loaf of bread and some pastries to take with us. Sarah and I walked through the market, looking at everything the vendors had to offer. We stopped to talk to one of the local farmers who was selling fresh tomatoes. Mr. Thomas introduced us, and the farmer, whose name was John, told us about his farm. He explained how he grew the tomatoes using organic methods, without any chemicals. John even invited us to visit his farm later in the week to see how the tomatoes were grown. It was nice to meet someone so passionate about his work, and we agreed to take him up on his offer. After spending some time at the market, we decided to take a break and sit in the village square. There was a small cafe with tables set up outside, and we ordered some coffee and tea. As we sat down, we could hear the sound of children playing in the distance and the chatter of people enjoying their day. The atmosphere was so relaxing. It was clear that in Greenhill, life moved at a slower pace, and the people here valued their time and relationships with each other. While we sat, Mr. Thomas shared more stories about his life in the village. He told us that he had grown up here and had never lived anywhere else. He spoke fondly of his childhood, when he would run around the village with his friends, playing games and exploring the countryside. His stories reminded me of my own childhood, when I would spend time outside with my friends, exploring the parks and forests near my house. It made me realize how important it is to spend time in nature and to enjoy the simple pleasures of life. As we continued to talk, Mrs. Thomas joined us with a basket of homemade cookies. She had baked them earlier in the day, and they smelled amazing. We all enjoyed the cookies with our drinks and shared more stories about our lives. Sarah and I talked about our experiences in the city, and Mr. and Mrs. Thomas shared more about their life in the countryside. It was so interesting to hear about their different experiences, and it made me appreciate how diverse life can be, even in different parts of the same country. After our break, we decided to visit the local chapel. It was a beautiful building, with tall stained glass windows and a peaceful atmosphere. We walked inside and took a moment to admire the artwork and the peaceful environment. It was a place of quiet reflection, and we all sat for a moment in silence. Mr. Thomas told us that the chapel had been a place of comfort and support for the villagers during difficult times. Many people came here to pray, seek guidance, or simply find a moment of peace. It was a nice reminder of the importance of having a place to reflect and recharge, no matter where you are. As we left the chapel, we took a short walk to a nearby hill where we could see the whole village. From the top, we could see the fields, the village houses, the market square, and the church in the distance. The view was breathtaking. It was easy to see why people loved living in Greenhill. The landscape was beautiful, and the village felt like a close-knit community. Mr. Thomas said that the hill was his favorite place to come and think. He often visited to clear his mind and appreciate the beauty around him. We stayed at the top of the hill for a while, taking in the view and enjoying the fresh air. Sarah and I talked about how different life was here compared to the busy city life we were used to. It was a reminder of how important it is to slow down and appreciate the small moments in life. We talked about how we would take some of the peacefulness of Greenhill with us when we returned home. Later that afternoon, we made our way back to the guest house. The day had been full of experiences, walking through the village, meeting the locals, visiting the chapel, and enjoying the countryside. We felt grateful for the opportunity to see this side of life. As we walked back, I couldn't help but think about how much I had learned in just a few days. I had learned about the importance of nature, the value of community, and the simple pleasures of life. That evening, we had a delicious dinner at the guest house. Mr. and Mrs. Thomas had prepared a traditional countryside meal with fresh vegetables, homemade bread, and roasted meat. The meal was delicious, and we all sat together at the table, enjoying the food and each other's company. It was a perfect end to a perfect day. After dinner, we decided to take another walk around the village. The streets were quiet, and the village looked even more beautiful at night, with the lights from the houses shining in the distance. It was a peaceful moment, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of calm. As we walked, I asked Sarah what her favorite part of the day had been. She thought for a moment and said, "I think it was the time we spent by the stream in the forest. It was so peaceful, and it felt like we were the only ones there." I agreed. That had been one of my favorite moments too. The quiet of the forest, the sound of the stream, and the peacefulness of the surroundings had made it a special experience. Now, I want to ask you, what about you? Have you ever spent time in the countryside, walking through nature, or exploring small villages? What did you enjoy most about it? If you haven't had that experience yet, imagine what it would be like. What would you do? Where would you go? Practice your English by describing your ideal day in the countryside. The next day, we woke up early, eager to experience more of Green Hill. The sun was shining brightly through the windows, and the birds were already awake, chirping away. It was the perfect start to another beautiful day in the countryside. We had breakfast with Mr. and Mrs. Thomas, and as usual, they were full of energy and ready to show us more of the village. After breakfast, we decided to take a longer walk. This time, Mr. Thomas suggested we visit a nearby forest. He explained that the forest was a special place, full of tall trees, winding paths, and a stream that ran through it. He said it was a peaceful spot where many locals like to go for walks, have picnics, or just spend some quiet time. Sarah and I were excited about this plan, as we both loved being outdoors and surrounded by nature. We grabbed our backpacks, filled with some snacks and water, and set off toward the forest. The path was narrow and winding, with the occasional rabbit or squirrel running across. The air smelled fresh, and the sounds of the forest surrounded us, the rustling leaves, the birds singing, and the distant sound of the stream. It was a far cry from the busy streets of the city, and we both felt a sense of calm and happiness. As we walked deeper into the forest, we came to a clearing by the stream. The water was clear and sparkling in the sunlight, and we could see fish swimming lazily in the shallows. The trees were tall, their leaves creating a natural canopy above us. Mr. Thomas mentioned that this spot had been here for hundreds of years, and it was a place of great beauty and peace. We sat down on the grass by the stream and took in the surroundings. It was such a quiet, peaceful place. We all sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the sound of the water and the birds in the trees. It felt like the world had slowed down, and it made me realize how important it was to take breaks and enjoy nature. I shared my thoughts with Sarah, and she agreed. We both felt that spending time in nature like this was good for our mental health. It allowed us to relax, recharge, and simply enjoy the beauty of the world around us. After spending some time at the stream, we decided to continue our walk. Mr. Thomas led us to a part of the forest where there was a small wooden bridge crossing the stream. The bridge was old, but it looked sturdy. As we crossed it, Sarah and I joked about how it looked like something from an adventure movie. We laughed, and it was nice to feel so carefree in such a beautiful setting. On the other side of the bridge, the forest became even denser. The trees were thick, their branches twisting and turning above us. There were few paths, and we had to step carefully over the roots and rocks. Mr. Thomas pointed out different plants and trees, explaining their names and how they grew. It was like a living classroom, and I was amazed by all the knowledge he had about the forest. As we walked, we came across a small waterfall. It wasn't very big, but the sound of the water rushing over the rocks was calming and soothing. Sarah and I stood there for a moment, watching the water as it cascaded down into the pool below. It was a beautiful sight, and it reminded me of how important it was to find moments of peace in our busy lives. As we ate, we talked about our plans for the next day. Mr. and Mrs. Thomas suggested we visit a nearby village for a traditional market day. The village was known for its handmade crafts and local products, and they thought it would be a fun experience. Sarah and I were excited about the idea and agreed to go. After dinner, we went for a walk around the village, enjoying the calm night air. The streets were quiet and the houses were lit by soft, warm lights. We stopped for a moment to admire the view of the stars in the clear sky. It was a peaceful end to a wonderful day. The next morning, we set off early for the nearby village. The journey was short, but beautiful, and as we drove, Mr. Thomas pointed out more interesting sights along the way. He told us about the history of the village we were visiting, how it had been established hundreds of years ago, and how the community had worked together to build a strong, supportive environment. We arrived at the market and were immediately impressed by how lively it was. Stalls were filled with handmade crafts, fresh produce, and local products. There was a sense of community in the air, and we felt like we were part of something special. We spent the morning exploring the market, talking to the vendors, and buying some souvenirs to take home. It was a great way to end our trip to the countryside, and we both agreed that we would miss the peacefulness and beauty of Greenhill. Now, I want to ask you, have you ever visited a small village or spent time in the countryside? What did you do there? How did it make you feel? If you haven't had that experience yet, what would you like to do if you had the chance? Think about the activities you would enjoy and practice describing them in English. The next day, after a restful night's sleep, we decided to explore some more of Greenhill. The morning air was crisp and refreshing, and as we left the guest house, we could already feel the excitement building for another adventure. Mrs. Thomas had prepared a lovely breakfast for us: fresh bread, butter, jam, and eggs. It was a simple but delicious meal, and we all sat around the table, enjoying the warmth of the food and the cozy atmosphere. Over breakfast, Mr. Thomas told us about some hidden gems in the countryside that we hadn't seen yet. One place he recommended was a peaceful hilltop that provided a panoramic view of the village and the fields around it. He explained that from the hilltop, you could see the whole landscape stretching out, with the green fields, the small houses, and even the distant woods. Sarah and I were eager to go, and we quickly agreed to take a walk up to the hill. After breakfast, we packed a small bag with some snacks and water, and we set off toward the hill. The path to the hill was a little steeper than we expected, but it wasn't too difficult. We passed by more farms, with cows grazing peacefully and chickens pecking around the yard. The houses we passed were all made of stone or brick, with red roofs and neat gardens. It was easy to see that the people in this village took great pride in their homes and their land. As we climbed higher, the view started to open up. The houses below us began to look smaller, and the green fields spread out in every direction. The sky was a deep blue, and the sun was shining brightly. There were a few clouds in the sky, but they were fluffy and white, adding to the beauty of the scene. It felt like we were walking in a painting. Everything looked so perfect and peaceful. When we finally reached the top of the hill, we were all breathless but happy. The view was even more stunning than we had imagined. We could see the whole village of Greenhill, with its small streets, the church at the center, and the winding river that passed through the area. In the distance, there were rolling hills and thick forests, their green colors blending into the horizon. It was the kind of view that made you feel small and connected to the world at the same time. We spent some time at the top, taking photos, talking about how lucky we were to be there, and just enjoying the moment. It was so peaceful. There was no rush, no noise, just the sound of the wind and the occasional bird flying overhead. It felt like a perfect escape from the busy life we had back home. Sarah shared with me how she felt about this experience. She said, "It's hard to explain, but being up here just makes everything feel so simple. There's nothing complicated about it. It's just the view, the air, and the feeling of being at peace." I agreed with her completely. There was something magical about being in nature, away from the distractions of everyday life. After a while, we decided to head back down, but we weren't in any hurry. The walk down the hill was much easier, and we took our time, enjoying the beauty of the surroundings. As we walked, we talked more about how different life was here compared to the city. The pace of life was slower, and the people seemed more relaxed. It was clear that the countryside offered a lifestyle that many people in the city could only dream of. When we returned to the village, we felt like we had experienced something truly special. Mr. and Mrs. Thomas were waiting for us, and we were eager to share our adventure with them. They were happy to hear about our experience and suggested we take a break before going on our next adventure. They recommended we visit a local farm where we could see how people here grew their food and took care of the animals. We were excited about the idea, so we decided to spend the afternoon at the farm. The farm was only a short walk from the guest house, so we made our way over after resting for a bit. As we arrived, we were greeted by the farmer, a friendly man named James, who introduced us to his animals. He had cows, sheep, chickens, and even a few pigs. Sarah and I were both fascinated by the animals, and we asked James a lot of questions about how he took care of them. James explained that he had been running the farm for many years, and that it was a family business passed down from generation to generation. He shared stories about the history of the farm and how the land had changed over time. As we toured the farm, we learned a lot about farming life. We saw how the animals were fed, how the crops were grown, and how everything on the farm worked together to create a sustainable way of life. One of the most interesting parts of the tour was when James showed us how the cows were milked. He explained the process in detail, and Sarah and I had the chance to try milking a cow ourselves. It was harder than it looked, but we had fun trying. James also taught us about the different types of milk and how it's used in making cheese and other dairy products. We were amazed at how much work went into running a farm, and it made us appreciate the food we eat even more. After the tour, James invited us to sit down for a simple meal made from fresh ingredients grown on the farm. It was a delicious meal. Fresh bread, cheese, vegetables, and homemade jam. We all sat together at a long wooden table, enjoying the food and the company. It felt so satisfying to eat food that had been grown and prepared right there on the farm. The whole experience gave us a deeper understanding of where our food comes from and how much effort is put into making sure we have fresh, healthy ingredients to eat. As the day came to a close, we walked back to the guest house, feeling grateful for the amazing experiences we had in Greenhill. It had been a day full of new discoveries, beautiful views, peaceful moments, and a deeper connection to nature. We both agreed that this trip had been one of the most memorable of our lives. It had reminded us of the simple joys in life, like spending time in nature, connecting with people, and appreciating the beauty of the world around us. Now, I want to ask you, have you ever visited a farm or spent time learning about where your food comes from? What did you learn from that experience? If you haven't had that opportunity yet, what would you like to know about farming and the countryside? Take a moment to think about it and practice describing your experience in English. The next day, we decided to explore more of the countryside, as we hadn't seen everything Greenhill had to offer. We woke up early to make the most of the day. Mrs. Thomas, the owner of the guest house, had prepared another wonderful breakfast. For us, this time it was warm porridge, served with fresh fruit and honey. We sat at the dining table, enjoying the food and chatting about what we wanted to do that day. Mrs. Thomas mentioned a local market in a nearby village, and we thought it would be a great way to learn more about the area. After breakfast, we walked to the village market, which was about a half-hour's walk from Greenhill. On the way there, we passed more farms and fields, with the sun shining brightly overhead. It was such a peaceful walk, with the only sounds being the birds singing and the rustling of the leaves in the trees. We talked about the things we had seen and how nice it was to be in a place so quiet and calm compared to the hustle and bustle of the city. When we reached the market, we were surprised by how busy it was. There were many stalls selling fresh vegetables, fruits, homemade jams, bread, and local crafts. The smell of fresh food filled the air, and it was easy to see that. This was a very important part of life in the village. People were chatting with each other, picking out fresh produce, and haggling over prices. It felt very different from the markets back home, which were often crowded and noisy. Sarah and I decided to take a look around and see what we could find. We first visited a stall selling fresh vegetables. The vegetables were so vibrant in color: deep green lettuce, bright red tomatoes, and golden carrots. The farmer at the stall was an older man named Mr. Williams, who smiled at us and welcomed us to his stall. He explained that his farm was just down the road and that everything he sold was grown without any chemicals. He even offered us a taste of his tomatoes, which were incredibly sweet and juicy. We couldn't resist and bought a few to take back to the guest house. Next, we visited a stall where a lady named Mrs. Bennett was selling homemade jams. She had a variety of jams: strawberry, raspberry, and even some unusual flavors like apple and cinnamon. We spent a few minutes talking with her, And she shared stories about how she learned to make jam from her grandmother. Sarah and I decided to buy a jar of the strawberry jam, which we were excited to try later. As we continued walking around the market, we noticed a stall selling handmade pottery. The pots and bowls were beautifully crafted, and each piece was unique. The seller, a young man named Tom, explained that he made everything by hand, and each piece took several days to complete. We were so impressed by his work that we decided to buy a small bowl to take home as a souvenir. It was a perfect reminder of our time in Greenhill. After spending some time at the market, we met up with Mr. and Mrs. Thomas, who had also been exploring the stalls. They were happy to see that we had enjoyed the market and bought some local products. They suggested we head to a nearby lake for a peaceful walk. We were all eager to explore more of the countryside, so we agreed and set off in the direction of the lake. The walk to the lake was a little longer, but it was worth every step. The path led us through dense woods with tall trees surrounding us on all sides. The air smelled fresh and earthy, and we could hear the crunch of leaves underfoot as we walked. We passed a few more farms along the way, and we even saw a family of deer grazing in a field. It was amazing to see wild animals in their natural habitat, and we stopped for a moment to admire the peaceful scene. When we arrived at the lake, it was even more beautiful than we had imagined. The water was calm and clear, reflecting the blue sky above. There were a few boats on the shore, but other than that, the lake was quiet and serene. We decided to take a short boat ride across the lake to enjoy the view from the water. The boat was small, but it felt safe and comfortable. As we paddled across the lake, we marveled at the stunning scenery, the trees surrounding the lake, the hills in the distance, and the birds flying overhead. It was the perfect place to relax and clear our minds. After our boat ride, we spent some time sitting by the lake, enjoying the peaceful surroundings. It was hard to believe how different life was here compared to the city. There was no rush, no traffic, and no noise, just the sound of nature all around us. Sarah and I both agreed that this was the perfect place to unwind and forget about the stress of daily life. As we sat by the lake, Mr. Thomas began telling us more about the history of Greenhill and the surrounding area. He explained that the village had been around for centuries and that many of the farms had been passed down from generation to generation. He also shared stories about the local traditions and festivals that took place throughout the year. Meaning to you was clear that the people of Greenhill took great pride in their village and their heritage. We spent several hours at the lake, enjoying the beauty of the area and learning more about the local culture. As the sun began to set, we decided to head back to the guest house. The walk back was peaceful, and we talked about how much we had learned and experienced during our time in the countryside. We agreed that we had seen a side of life that we hadn't expected, and it was something we would never forget. When we returned to the guest house, Mrs. Thomas had prepared a delicious dinner for us. It was a hearty meal: roast chicken with vegetables, mashed potatoes, and a fresh salad. We all sat around the table, sharing our experiences from the day and talking about what we wanted to do the next day. It was clear that we had all fallen in love with Greenhill and its peaceful way of life. That night, as we went to bed, I couldn't help but think about how different life in the countryside was compared to the busy, fast-paced life back home. There was something special about the simplicity of it all, being surrounded by nature, spending time with kind and welcoming people, and taking the time to enjoy the small moments in life. It reminded me of the importance of slowing down and appreciating the world around us. I hope you enjoyed hearing about my trip to the countryside. It's always refreshing to experience a slower pace of life and connect with nature. Maybe this story inspired you to think about your own ideal getaway or how you can escape the fast pace of daily life from time to time. Before we finish today, I want to remind you that practicing your listening skills, like we did today, is an important step in improving your English. When you listen to real-life stories and examples, you get a better sense of how the language is used naturally. So keep listening, keep practicing, and don't forget to press the like button if you enjoyed the episode. And if you're new to the English Pod community, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our future episodes. We upload videos regularly to help you improve your English skills every day. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Welcome to the Artificial Fluency Podcast, where we delve into fascinating concepts while elevating your English proficiency. I'm Emma, and today we're exploring the psychological labyrinth known as the paradox of choice. In a world saturated with options, could the abundance of choices actually be undermining our happiness? Let's unravel this contemporary conundrum together. Have you ever stood paralyzed in the supermarket aisle, confronted by 47 varieties of breakfast cereal? Or perhaps you've spent an inordinate amount of time scrolling through streaming platforms, unable to commit to a film despite hundreds of options at your fingertips. If so, you've experienced what psychologist Barry Schwartz famously termed the paradox of choice. The counterintuitive notion that an abundance of options often leads not to liberation and satisfaction, but rather to decision paralysis and diminished contentment. This phenomenon permeates virtually every aspect of modern existence, from the trivial to the profound, from selecting a smartphone among countless models to navigating the labyrinthine landscape of career paths in our increasingly fluid professional ecosystem. Today we'll dissect this paradox, examining its psychological underpinnings, its manifestations in contemporary society, and potential strategies for mitigating its insidious effects. Let's begin by exploring some sophisticated vocabulary related to choice and decision-making. These terms will not only enrich your linguistic repertoire but also provide conceptual frameworks for understanding the nuances of this paradox. Cognitive overhead refers to the mental effort required to process information and make decisions. Each additional option increases this overhead, potentially leading to mental fatigue. Opportunity cost describes what you sacrifice when making a choice, essentially, the value of the roads not taken. Counterfactual thinking involves imagining alternative scenarios that might have unfolded had you made different choices, the mental gymnastics of what if. Analysis paralysis occurs when overthinking a decision leads to decision-making impairment or complete decisional standstill. Maximizing versus satisficing represents two decisional strategies exhaustively seeking the absolute best option versus settling for the first acceptable option encountered. Now let's delve into the psychological mechanisms underlying this paradox. Barry Schwartz's groundbreaking research illuminates several factors that transform abundant choice from blessing to burden. First, there's the tyranny of elevated expectations. When options proliferate, we anticipate greater satisfaction from our eventual selection. After all, with so many possibilities, surely one must be perfect. This expectation, however reasonable it may seem, invariably sets the stage for disappointment. Second, we encounter the phenomena of regret amplification. More options create more opportunities for counterfactual thinking, the mental simulation of roads not taken. The specter of these unlived alternatives haunts us, fostering the suspicion that a superior choice lurked somewhere in the discarded options. Third, there's the escalation of responsibility. When options were scarce, suboptimal outcomes could be attributed to limited choices. Now, with virtually unlimited options, the burden of a disappointing result falls squarely on our shoulders. We should have chosen better. Finally, we face the cumulative cognitive tax of decision-making. Each choice depletes our finite reserve of mental energy, a phenomenon psychologists call decision fatigue. By day's end, our cognitive resources have been so thoroughly depleted that we become susceptible to impulsive decisions or decision avoidance altogether. This paradox manifests in particularly fascinating ways in our digital ecosystem. Consider the modern phenomenon of content paralysis, that peculiar state where, despite having immediate access to virtually all of humanity's creative output, we find ourselves unable to select a film, book, or album. A 2019 study found that the average American spends approximately 23 minutes daily deciding what to watch on streaming platforms. That's nearly 6 days, annually spent not on consumption but merely on selection. The cognitive overhead of navigating these vast digital libraries essentially creates a new form of scarcity, not of content, but of the attention and decisional energy required to access it. Social media platforms similarly exploit the paradox of choice through infinite scrolling mechanisms. The endless procession of potentially interesting content triggers what psychologists call the variable reward pattern, the same mechanism that powers gambling addiction. Each scroll promises the possibility of something marginally more engaging than what came before, creating a perpetual state of mild dissatisfaction with the current content, while tantalizing us with the prospect of something better just a scroll away. Let's examine a particularly illuminating experiment conducted at Columbia University that crystallizes this paradox. Researchers set up 2 displays of gourmet jam in a high-end supermarket. One display featured 6 varieties, while the other offered 24. The larger display attracted more initial attention. Shoppers were drawn to the abundance of options. However, a remarkable pattern emerged at the point of purchase. 30% of customers who encountered the smaller display ultimately purchased jam, compared to a mere 3% of those who faced the 24 options. This tenfold difference in conversion rates vividly illustrates how excessive choice can impede rather than facilitate action. The cognitive overhead of comparing 24 varieties, weighing their relative merits, anticipating potential regret, and shouldering the responsibility of selection, created such friction that most shoppers opted to make no choice at all. The paradox extends beyond consumer behavior into the realm of life satisfaction and psychological well-being. Research has consistently demonstrated a correlation between maximizing tendencies, the compulsion to exhaustively evaluate all options in pursuit of the optimal choice, and diminished happiness. Maximizers, despite often achieving objectively better outcomes, typically report less satisfaction with their decisions than satisficers, who accept the first adequate option they encounter. The maximizer's pursuit of the ideal option comes at a significant psychological cost, heightened anxiety during the decision process, lingering doubt afterward, and increased vulnerability to regret. This phenomenon has profound implications for contemporary life satisfaction. As societal affluence increases, so too does the proliferation of choices across virtually all domains. Yet paradoxically, this expansion of freedom and opportunity may contribute to the epidemic of anxiety and dissatisfaction that characterizes much of modern existence. Now let's pivot to strategies for navigating this paradoxical landscape. How might we maintain the benefits of choice while mitigating its psychological costs? First, consider adopting what psychologists call satisficing thresholds, predetermined criteria that, when met, signal that an option is good enough to warrant selection without further search. This pre-commitment to reasonable standards helps circumvent the maximizer's trap of endless comparison. Second, practice intentional limitation. Curate your own choice environment by deliberately constraining certain decision domains. Consider capsule wardrobes, meal planning, or scheduled media consumption, all strategies that reduce daily decisional burden. Third, implement the 10th of October 10 rule for significant decisions. How will you feel about this choice 10 minutes from now? 10 months from now? 10 years from now? This temporal framework helps calibrate the appropriate investment of decisional resources relative to a choice's long-term significance. Finally, consider decision outsourcing where appropriate. Subscription services, trusted recommenders, or even algorithmic suggestions can effectively reduce choice overhead in non-critical domains, preserving cognitive resources for more consequential decisions. As we approach the conclusion of today's exploration, let's reflect on the broader philosophical implications of the paradox of choice. There's a profound irony in the fact that the expansion of freedom, surely one of humanity's noblest aspirations, can inadvertently undermine the very well-being it aims to enhance. This paradox invites us to reconsider our cultural equation of maximum choice with maximum welfare. Perhaps true freedom lies not in unlimited options but in the cultivation of discernment, the wisdom to know which choices merit our attention and which are better simplified or delegated. In his seminal work on this topic, Barry Schwartz offers this poignant observation: the expansion of freedom can actually mean the contraction of happiness. This counterintuitive insight challenges us to develop a more nuanced relationship with choice, to embrace abundance where it enriches our lives, while establishing protective boundaries where it threatens to overwhelm. Have you ever found it hard to follow native speakers during conversations or on TV shows? Do you sometimes feel lost when they speak quickly or use slang? What kind of situations do you want to understand better? Think about your answers as we go through today's episode. Now, let me share a story about my friend Mark. Mark moved to the United States last year. At first, he struggled a lot because native speakers spoke very fast. One day, he went to a coffee shop and the barista asked him, "Would you like a small or tall coffee?" Mark was confused because in his country, coffee sizes are different. He hesitated but chose small. Later, Mark learned that tall means small in that coffee shop. This story shows how important it is to understand different expressions and cultural meanings when you listen. Another example is from my husband, Daniel. Daniel works in a busy office where people use a lot of informal language. One afternoon, a colleague said, "Let's touch base later." At first, Daniel thought they were talking about sports, but then he understood it means, "Let's talk later." Knowing these small phrases makes a big difference in understanding conversations. So how can you improve? First, listen to short stories or conversations like these every day. Try to write down new words or phrases you hear. Then, practice using them in your own sentences. Also, pay attention to how native speakers link words together, like gonna instead of going to, or wanna instead of want to. These are common in real conversations. Here's a quick practice for you. Listen carefully. "I'm gonna meet my wife at the station." What does gonna mean here? It means going to. Using this kind of natural speech will help you understand native speakers faster. Next, imagine you are at a party and someone says, "That's cool." What do they mean? They are saying something is good or nice. These little expressions are everywhere, and knowing them helps you feel more confident. Let me tell you about another experience from my friend Sarah. She once missed an important meeting because she didn't understand when someone said, "The meeting is pushed back to 3 p.m. She thought the meeting was canceled. Push back actually means the meeting was delayed, not canceled. This shows why learning phrases is important for understanding native speakers. One way to get better is to watch English videos or listen to podcasts with subtitles. This helps you connect spoken and written English. Write down phrases and try to use them in your daily conversations or writing. That way, your brain remembers better. Do you want to try a small challenge? Listen to a short English story or conversation every day. Write 5 new phrases or words. Then explain their meaning in your own words. Share your sentences with a friend or teacher. This simple exercise will improve your listening and writing skills together. Remember, understanding native English speakers takes time and practice. Be patient with yourself. Use stories, examples, and real conversations to learn naturally. Keep listening and writing every day. Now, let's listen to a short conversation between 2 colleagues, Emma and John. Emma says, "John, could you give me a hand with this report?" What does give me a hand mean? It means help me. John replies, "Sure, no problem." Using phrases like this makes English sound natural and friendly. In real life, native speakers use many expressions like this. The more you hear, the easier it will be to understand them. Try to guess the meaning from context first. Then check in a dictionary if you are not sure. Before we continue, think about this. What English phrases have you recently learned? How do you practice listening every day? Feel free to write your answers in the comments. In this episode, we will keep sharing useful stories and examples to help you listen like a native speaker. Keep your notebook ready, and don't forget to press the like button if you are enjoying this practice. Let's move forward with another story from my friend David. David was invited to dinner by his new neighbors. During the dinner, someone said, "Help yourself to the salad." David wasn't sure if he should ask for permission. Later, he understood that help yourself means take what you want. Knowing this expression helped him feel more comfortable at the party. If you listen carefully and practice these phrases, you will start understanding native speakers more clearly. Writing down what you hear improves your memory and helps with speaking too. Here is another phrase to remember. catch up later. It means to talk again soon. For example, I have to go now, but let's catch up later. Try to use this phrase next time you talk with friends. Now, I want you to listen to a short story about Lisa and her husband Tom. Tom enjoys hiking. One weekend, Tom said, "I'm planning to hit the trail early tomorrow." Lisa asked, "What does hit the trail mean?" Tom explained, "It means to start hiking." This shows how native speakers use many idioms and phrases. Learning them helps you understand better. Try to learn idioms and common phrases little by little. Use them in your daily conversations or writing. This will improve your English faster than just studying grammar. Are you ready to practice more? Keep listening, keep writing, and soon you will notice your skills growing stronger. Now let's listen to a conversation between a teacher, Mr. Clark, and his student, Mia. Mr. Clark says, "Mia, don't forget to hand in your assignment by Friday." What does hand in mean? It means submit or give to the teacher. Mia replies, "I will, thank you." By learning these everyday expressions, you will understand native English speakers in classrooms, offices, and social places. Before we continue, take a moment to think. What is the hardest part of listening for you? Is it speed, vocabulary, or pronunciation? Identifying this will help you focus your practice better. Next, I will share a story about my cousin Alex. Alex works in a restaurant. One busy evening, a customer said, "I'm starving." Alex didn't know what it meant. Later, he learned it means very hungry. Now Alex understands better when customers use informal expressions. Learning these words and phrases helps you feel more confident and relaxed when speaking or listening. Do you want to try a small exercise now? Listen to short dialogues on TV or podcasts. Write down 2 new phrases every day. Look up their meanings and try to use them in your own sentences. This simple habit will improve your listening, vocabulary, and writing all at once. Let's listen to one more quick conversation between friends, Olivia and Mark. Olivia says, "Mark, can you pick me up at 6? Mark replies, "Sure, I'll be there." Pick me up means come and get me. Knowing these common expressions makes everyday English easier to understand. Keep practicing with real stories and conversations. This is the best way to learn. Let's continue with another story about my friend James. James recently started a new job at a busy office. One day his boss said, "James, can you cover for me during the meeting?" At first, James was not sure what cover for me meant. Later, he understood it means to do someone's work while they are away. This is a very useful phrase to know, because native speakers use it often at work. When you hear new phrases like this, try to repeat them aloud. It helps your brain remember and understand faster. Writing them down also makes a big difference. Here is a short practice for you. Imagine your colleague asks, "Can you give me a hand with this project?" What does it mean? It means, "Can you help me?" Try to say it in your own words. Now I will share a story about my wife, Anna. Anna went to a doctor's appointment last week. The doctor said, "You need to take it easy for a few days." Anna wasn't sure if she should stop all activities or just relax a little. The phrase "take it easy" means to rest and not do too much. Understanding phrases like this helps in many real-life situations. When native speakers talk, they often use expressions that are not in textbooks. This is why listening to real stories is so important. It helps you learn the English people use every day. Let's try another phrase. Hold on a second. If someone says this, it means wait for a moment. For example, if you are talking to someone on the phone and they say, "Hold on," you should wait quietly for a moment. This is very common in conversations. Now, listen to a story about my friend, Rachel. Rachel was shopping in a store and the cashier said, "Would you like a bag?" Rachel said, "No, thank you." Later, Rachel learned that bag means a plastic or paper bag to carry her things. Simple words like this are important to know so you understand daily conversations. Try to listen carefully to common words and phrases in everyday life. Here's another quick example. If someone says, "I'm running late," it means they will arrive later than planned. For example, if your husband is late for dinner, he might say, "Sorry, I'm running late." Try to notice these small phrases when you talk or listen. They make a big difference. Let's hear a story about my friend Kevin. Kevin was at a park and someone asked him, "Do you want to join us for a walk?" Kevin was happy and said, "Yes, I'd love to." The phrase "join us" means come with us. This is a friendly way to invite someone. When you hear invitations or polite offers, try to learn how native speakers say them. It will help you feel more confident in your own conversations. Here is a phrase to remember: no worries. It means, it's okay or don't worry about it. For example, if you say sorry, the other person might say, "No worries, keep practicing." These expressions every day. Write them down and try to use them. Now think about this question. What are some common phrases you hear in English that you don't fully understand? Write them down and try to find their meaning. The best way to improve is to listen often and practice speaking and writing with these phrases. Let me tell you about my neighbor, Lisa. Lisa needed help fixing her computer. She called her husband and said, "Can you take a look at my computer?" Her husband replied, "Sure, I'll check it now." The phrase "take a look" means look carefully. This is a common way to ask for help. When native speakers talk, they use many short phrases like this. Learning them makes listening easier. Here's a practice sentence. If someone says, "Let's grab lunch," it means, let's eat lunch together. Try to use this phrase when you invite someone. Keep listening and writing every day. Soon, you will understand more and more. Now I want to share a story about my cousin Ben. Ben's boss told him, "Please follow up with the client tomorrow." Ben asked, "What does follow up mean?" The boss explained, "It means to check or contact someone again." This phrase is very common in business and daily life. Try to learn small phrases like follow up, give a hand, or catch up. They help you understand native speakers better. Are you ready to try a small listening practice now? Listen to a conversation and write down 3 new phrases. Then, check their meanings and try to use them in sentences. This simple habit will improve your English step by step. Let's listen to a short dialogue between 2 friends, Emma and Jake. Emma says, "Jake, can you pick up some groceries?" Jake replies, "Yes, I will." The phrase pick up means to buy or collect something. Knowing these phrases helps you in daily life. Keep practicing with real conversations and stories. This is the best way to learn English naturally. Let's continue with more helpful stories and real-life phrases that native English speakers often use. These will make your listening and writing skills much better. So stay focused, listen carefully, and think about how you can use these expressions in your daily life. Now, let's talk about my friend Daniel. Daniel works at a local office. One day his coworker Sarah asked him, "Daniel, can you fill in for me tomorrow?" At first, Daniel didn't understand. He thought maybe she was talking about a form or a document. But later, he realized that fill in for me means to do someone's job when they are not there. This is a very common phrase, especially at work. If someone is sick or has an appointment, they might ask a coworker to fill in for them. Daniel agreed to help, and the next day, he went to Sarah's desk and completed her tasks. After that, Daniel told me, "Now I understand what that phrase means. It's actually very useful." When you hear native speakers say phrases like this, it can be confusing. That's why listening to real stories helps you learn them more easily. If you don't understand something, it's okay. You can ask or look it up later, but try to remember the situation, the tone, and the meaning behind the words. Let's move on to another common phrase that native speakers use. "I'll get back to you." I remember a moment when my wife, Anna, applied for a new job. After her interview, she asked the manager, "When will I hear from you?" The manager smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'll get back to you by Friday." Anna was not sure what it meant. Later, I explained to her that "I'll get back to you" means "I will contact you again later." It's something you often hear in business or in polite conversation. For example, if someone asks you a question and you don't have the answer right now, you can say, "Let me check and I'll get back to you." These phrases are not always easy to guess from the words alone. That's why we use this podcast, to help you understand them through real stories and easy examples. Now here's another story about my friend Claire. Claire runs a small bakery. One day a customer came in late in the afternoon and said, "I'm looking for something quick to grab and go." Claire wasn't sure what grab and go meant, so she asked politely, "Would you like something easy to carry?" The customer smiled and pointed to a sandwich. "Yes, that's perfect." After the customer left, Claire looked up the phrase. Grab and go means food that is ready to take with you. No need to sit down and eat. It's a phrase you might hear in shops, restaurants, or even when someone is in a hurry. So if you're ever in a situation where someone says, "Grab and go," now you'll know exactly what they mean. You can also use this phrase when you're busy and don't have time to sit and eat. Say something like, "I just want something quick to grab and go." Let's keep going. This time, I want to share something that happened to my neighbor David. David is a very friendly man who likes to help others. One day, his neighbor Emma knocked on the door and said, "Hey David, I'm in a bit of a rush. Can you keep an eye on my kids for 5 minutes while I run to the store?" David smiled and agreed. But after Emma left, he started thinking, what does "keep an eye on" mean exactly? He knew it meant something like watching, but he wasn't sure. Later, he learned that "keep an eye on" means to watch something or someone for a short time. It's often used in casual speech. For example, if you are cooking something, you might say to your husband or wife, "Can you keep an eye on the soup while I answer the phone?" Or if you have children, you might say, "Please keep an eye on them while they play outside." These small phrases make your English sound more natural. Native speakers use them without thinking, but learners need practice to understand and use them correctly. Now let's talk about a conversation between two friends, Michael and Tom. Michael was going to meet Tom at the train station, but Tom was late. Michael called him and asked, "Where are you?" Tom said, "Sorry, I got held up in traffic." Michael was confused. Held up? Did something bad happen? Did someone stop him? Afterward, Tom explained, held up can mean delayed, especially by something unexpected like traffic, work, or an emergency. It's another phrase that can sound strange at first, but once you hear it in real situations, you start to remember what it means. So next time someone says they got held up, it usually just means they were delayed. You can also use it yourself. For example, "Sorry I'm late. I got held up at work." Let me share one more helpful story. This one is about my cousin Emily. She works at a clothing shop. A customer once said to her, "This shirt is not really my cup of tea." Emily smiled, but she was confused. She told me later, "What does tea have to do with shirts? I laughed and explained. Not my cup of tea means I don't like it or it's not my style. It's a polite way to say you're not interested in something. Even though it sounds strange, this phrase is very common. For example, if someone invites you to an activity you don't enjoy, you can say, "Thanks, but it's not really my cup of tea." It's polite and easy to say, and native speakers understand it well. So keep listening, and don't forget to write down any new expressions you hear. Try to use them when you speak or write. That's how you will really start to understand native English speakers. If you're enjoying this podcast so far, press the like button and make sure to follow for more English listening practice. Every day here on the English Pod community, we bring you real-life stories. Let's keep going, and thank you for staying with me. You're doing great, and your listening skills will improve more and more if you stay focused. In today's episode from the English Pod community, we are helping you understand how native English speakers talk in daily life, using real stories, useful phrases, and natural conversations. So now, let me tell you more stories with easy examples and clear explanations to help you understand better. I want to tell you about James, who works at a construction company. He had a new worker named Kevin join his team. On the first day, Kevin seemed a little nervous. James wanted to help him feel more relaxed, so he said, "No worries, Kevin. I'll show you the ropes." Kevin looked surprised and said, "What ropes?" He thought maybe James was talking about real ropes for climbing or lifting things. But actually, show you the ropes means teaching someone how to do a job or task. It means giving them instructions or helping them learn how things are done. James laughed a little and explained, "I just mean I'll show you how everything works around here." Kevin smiled and said, "Okay, thanks. I was really confused." Now Kevin uses that phrase all the time with new workers. When he helps others, he says, "Let me show you the ropes." So when you hear someone say "show the ropes," it simply means helping someone understand how to do something new. Let's talk about another day in Kevin's life. A week later, one of his co-workers named Brian came to work looking tired. Kevin asked, "Hey Brian, everything okay?" Brian yawned and said, "I burned the candle at both ends last night." Kevin raised his eyebrows. "You burned a candle?" he asked. Brian laughed and said, "No, it just means I stayed up really late and got up early today." Kevin laughed too and said, "You should get some rest tonight." This is another phrase that native speakers use often, burning the candle at both ends. It means working very hard and sleeping very little. You might be working late and waking up early, and that can make you feel tired. People use this phrase when they are very busy or trying to do too much in one day. Let me share something from my own experience now. A few years ago, I had a neighbor named Rachel. She was always friendly and polite. One morning, she knocked on my door and said, "Sorry to bother you, but I need a quick favor." I said, "Of course, what do you need?" She said, "Can I borrow your car for half an hour? Mine won't start." I told her, "No problem." After she left, I remembered something she had said earlier in the week. She said, "I always try to return the favor." At the time, I didn't think about it much, but that day I realized how helpful she was. Return the favor means doing something kind for someone because they helped you before. So if someone helps you, and later you help them back, that's called returning the favor. It's a good expression to know when you talk about helping friends, neighbors, or coworkers. Now let me tell you about a conversation between Mark and his wife Lisa. They were at the store buying some groceries. Mark looked at the list and said, "Let's stick to the list today." Lisa smiled and said, "I know, but I just want to check the snack section." Mark laughed and said, "You always say that?" Stick to the list is a phrase people use when they want to stay focused and not get distracted. In this case, it means buying only the things on their shopping list. You can also use this phrase in many situations, like when studying. For example, if you're reviewing vocabulary, you might say, "Let me stick to this page for now." It's a way to stay focused and not move away from your goal. Native speakers use it all the time when they want to remind themselves or others to stay on track. Another good story comes from a man named Andrew. Andrew works as a plumber, and he's always busy. One morning his phone rang. It was a client named Peter. Peter said, "Hi Andrew, I hate to bother you, but something's come up. Can we reschedule?" Andrew said, "No problem, I understand. Things happen." When Peter said, "Something's come up," he meant that something unexpected had happened, and he couldn't make the appointment. This phrase is common in daily English. When you hear someone say something's come up, it usually means they had a change of plans because of an emergency or surprise. You can use it too. For example, if you can't go to a meeting or visit someone, you can say, "I'm sorry, something came up." Let me share a time when I heard that phrase. I had a meeting with my cousin Thomas. We planned to meet at a cafe at 3 p.m. But at 2:30, Thomas called and said, "Natasha, I'm really sorry, something's come up. Can we meet tomorrow instead?" He sounded stressed, so I knew it was serious. I said, "Of course, no problem, at all." That's how native speakers use that phrase in a real-life way. Now, let's go to another common phrase. Play it by ear. I remember hearing this when I was visiting my aunt's house. My cousin Emily wanted to go to the park, but it looked like it might rain. She asked her husband, "Should we still go?" He replied, "Let's play it by ear." Emily was confused. "What does music have to do with this?" she asked. He laughed and said, "No, it just means let's decide later, depending on the situation." That's what play it by ear means. You wait and see what happens before making a decision. Native speakers use this when they don't want to plan everything right away. So if someone asks, "What time will you leave?" and you're not sure, you can say, "I'll play it by ear." Another helpful phrase is call it a day. This story is about a man named Paul. Paul is a carpenter who builds furniture. One evening he was working on a table when his wife, Claire, came in and said, "You've been working all day. Maybe it's time to call it a day." Paul looked at the clock and realized it was already 7 p.m. He smiled and said, "You're right. Let's have dinner." Call it a day means to stop working because you've done enough for now. You can use this at work, during study, or even when cleaning your home. For example, after studying English for a few hours, you might say, "I've learned a lot today. I think I'll call it a day." Here's another good one. Out of the blue. This happened to my friend John. John was reading a book when he got a phone call from an old friend he hadn't spoken to in 5 years. He answered and said, "Wow, this is so out of the blue." The friend laughed and said, "I know, I just thought of you and wanted to say hi." Out of the blue means something that happens suddenly and without warning. It's a surprise. You can use this phrase when something unexpected happens. For example, she showed up at my door out of the blue. Or, he asked me a question out of the blue. All of these stories and examples come from daily life, and native English speakers use these phrases naturally. As you listen to them in this podcast, your brain will start to remember them. Try to say them out loud after me. Even writing them down can help you remember better. The more you listen to real English, the more natural it becomes. Thank you for listening, and I'm so glad you're here. This is Natasha, and you're listening to the English Pod community. I know you're serious about improving your English, and in this episode, we are working hard to help you understand how native English speakers talk in real life. These stories and examples are not from books. They are real conversations that happen every day, and they help you build listening and writing skills at the same time. Now, let's talk about a very common situation. Imagine you're at work, and someone says, "Let's get the ball rolling." What do you think that means? Are they going to play a game? Are they talking about a ball? Not really. Let me tell you a story. Susan works in an office. One day, she had a meeting with her coworkers. They were planning a small event for the company. Everyone was sitting quietly, not sure how to start. Susan looked around and said, "Okay, let's get the ball rolling. We need to make a list of what we need for the event." When she said that, people smiled, and the conversation started. Let's get the ball rolling means let's begin something. It's a way to say, let's start now. You can use this at work, at home, or with friends. For example, if you want to start cleaning your room, you can say, "Let me get the ball rolling and start with my desk." It's a friendly and active phrase. Now here's another phrase you'll often hear. Break the ice. It has nothing to do with cold weather or frozen lakes. It means to make people feel comfortable when they first meet. Let me give you an example. One day, Daniel started a new job. He was quiet, sitting alone in the break room. His coworker Sarah noticed this and walked over. She smiled and said, "Hey, I'm Sarah. I work in the sales team. Want some coffee?" Daniel smiled back, and they started chatting. Later, Daniel said, "Thanks, Sarah. You really helped break the ice." So when someone says, "break the ice," it means doing something to help people relax or start a conversation, especially when they don't know each other well. You can break the ice by asking a simple question, offering help, or giving a kind smile. It's a great phrase for school, work, or social gatherings. Now let's move to another helpful expression, under the weather. No, it doesn't mean you are standing in the rain. It actually means someone is feeling sick or not well. Let me tell you about George. He usually wakes up early and goes for a walk. But one morning, he stayed in bed. His wife Emily asked, "Are you okay?" George replied, "I feel a little under the weather today. Maybe I caught a cold." Emily nodded and said, "Take it easy today. I'll bring you some tea." So when someone says they are under the weather, it means they don't feel well. Maybe they have a headache or a sore throat. Native English speakers use this phrase often, especially when talking to friends, family, or coworkers. Now, here's another story. It's about Laura and her husband Michael. Laura wanted to buy a new washing machine, but she wasn't sure if it was the right time. Michael said, "Let's sleep on it." Laura looked confused. "Sleep on what?" she asked. Michael smiled and said, "No, it means let's think about it overnight. We don't have to decide right now." Laura nodded and said, "That sounds like a good idea." So the phrase, "sleep on it," means you wait until the next day to make a decision. It gives you time to think. This is a common phrase used in business, at home, or anytime someone needs to decide something important. Another great phrase is pulling someone's leg. Let me give you a simple story. Ben and his friend Charles were working together on a home project. Charles said, "Ben, I just saw a snake in your toolbox." Ben jumped up, shocked. Then Charles laughed and said, "Just kidding. I'm pulling your leg." Ben laughed too and said, "You got me." So pulling someone's leg means you are joking with them. You're not serious. It's a fun way to say you're teasing or trying to be funny. Native speakers use this in light situations. But remember, always smile or laugh after so the other person knows you're joking. Now let's move to another phrase. The ball is in your court. This one sounds like it comes from sports, and it does. But we use it in conversation too. Imagine this. Rachel and Thomas are planning a family trip. Rachel says, "I found 3 good places we can go. I've emailed them to you." Thomas replies, "Okay, I'll take a look. Now the ball is in my court." That means it's his turn to do something. When you say the ball is in your court, it means someone else has to make a decision or take the next step. You can use this at work too. If you send an email and you're waiting for a reply, you can say, "Now the ball is in their court." Here's another helpful phrase, in hot water. It doesn't mean you're in the bathtub. It means you're in trouble. Let me give you an example. David forgot to send an important report to his boss. When the boss asked for it, David had nothing ready. Later, he told his coworker, "I'm in hot water now. I should have finished that report yesterday." So, in hot water means you've done something wrong or you're in a difficult situation. It's a good phrase to use when you want to describe a problem or mistake. Here's one more phrase that native speakers love to use. Hit the nail on the head. Let me tell you a quick story. Samantha and her husband William were talking about their budget. They were wondering why they didn't have much money left at the end of the month. Samantha looked at the bills and said, "I think it's because we've been eating out too much." William nodded and said, "You hit the nail on the head." That means she said exactly the right thing. Hit the nail on the head means to be completely correct or say something exactly right. You can use this in class, at work, or in everyday conversation. Now let's talk about one more phrase for today. Cut to the chase. This is used when someone wants to stop all the small talk and go directly to the main point. Imagine Brian is talking with his team at work. People are discussing many small topics, and time is running out. Brian says, "Let's cut to the chase. What's the main problem here?" That means, let's focus. What really matters? This phrase helps keep things clear and simple. You can use it when you're in a meeting, or even when talking with friends if you want to focus on the important part. As you can see, all of these phrases come from real conversations. Native English speakers use them without thinking, so the more you hear them, the more natural they become for you. Listening to these examples helps you understand real English, and using them helps you speak with more confidence. Thank you for staying with me. I hope you are repeating some of these phrases in your mind or out loud. This is how real learning happens. Step by step, story by story, word by word. And if you're learning something new, please press the like button. It helps us grow and helps more learners like you find this channel. The English Pod community uploads English listening practice every day, so don't forget to follow. Now, let's continue with even more natural phrases and useful real-life conversations. Let's keep going. I want to take you even deeper into the real world of English conversation. In this part of the episode, we'll explore more ways that native speakers use everyday phrases. These expressions may seem confusing at first, but when you hear them, in real-life situations and stories, you'll start to understand them more easily. You'll also learn how to use them when speaking or writing. Remember, the more you listen, the better you get at recognizing these patterns and phrases. Let's begin with this phrase, keep an eye on something. It sounds like you're watching something very carefully, right? And that's exactly what it means. Let me share a story. Helen and her husband Robert were getting ready for a family dinner. Helen was cooking in the kitchen. The food was almost done, but she needed to answer a phone call. She turned to Robert and said, "Can you keep an eye on the oven while I take this call?" Robert nodded and stood near the oven. So, keep an eye on something means to watch something carefully. It could be food in the kitchen, children playing outside, or even someone's bag at the airport. It's a simple and helpful phrase you'll hear a lot. Here's another common expression. On the same page. Now, you might think this is about a book, but in conversation, it has a different meaning. It means that two or more people agree or understand each other. Let me give you an example. Jason and his coworker Linda were planning a project. Jason wanted to do the project in a simple way, while Linda wanted to make it more complex. They were going back and forth with ideas. Finally, Jason said, "Let's make sure we're on the same page. We need to follow the company's guidelines." Linda agreed, and they started working together more smoothly. So when you say, "we're on the same page," it means you and the other person share the same understanding. This is very useful in meetings, discussions, and even in family planning. Now here's a very natural phrase. Hit the ground running. It doesn't mean someone is falling down. It means to start something quickly and with full energy. Let me tell you about Peter. He got a new job in a travel company. On his first day, he arrived early, talked with his manager, and started answering emails and helping customers without waiting. His manager smiled and said, "Peter really hit the ground running." So when you hear this phrase, you'll know it means someone is starting strong without delay. It's often used in work settings or when talking about projects or new plans. Let's move on to another useful expression. In the long run. This means thinking about the future, not just today. Anna and her husband Eric were talking about buying a water filter. Eric said, "It's a bit expensive." But Anna replied, "Yes, but in the long run, we will save money by not buying bottled water." Eric thought about it and agreed. So when someone says, "in the long run," they're thinking about the big picture, what happens over time. It's a helpful phrase when you want to show the benefits of something in the future. Next is a very common phrase you will hear often. It's not a big deal. This means something is not serious or not a problem. Let me share this story. Thomas accidentally dropped a small spoon while helping his wife Rachel in the kitchen. He said, "I'm sorry." But Rachel smiled and said, "It's not a big deal. It's just a spoon." This helped Thomas feel better. When you use "it's not a big deal," you're telling someone not to worry. It's a kind and relaxed way to say everything is okay. Now let's talk about a different expression. Think outside the box. This means to think in a new or creative way, not the usual way. John was working on a problem at work. He needed a new idea to help customers. His manager said, "Try to think outside the box." John then came up with a plan that no one else had thought of. It worked, and everyone was happy. So if you want to show someone that you are thinking creatively, use this phrase. It's great for school, work, and even daily life when solving problems. Another good one is a piece of cake. It's not about food this time. It means something is very easy. Let me give you a simple story. Sarah needed to send an email. Her husband Mark asked, "Was it hard to write?" Sarah replied, "No, it was a piece of cake." That means it was very easy for her. So when something feels simple or doesn't take much effort, you can say it's a piece of cake. Let's now talk about a phrase people use when they want to stay calm. Take it easy. This means to relax or not get upset. Let's say James had a busy week at work. On the weekend, his wife Olivia said, "You should take it easy today. Just rest and enjoy some quiet time." James smiled. You can use "take it easy" with friends or family when you want someone to rest or stay calm. It's a gentle and kind phrase. Another phrase that's very useful is "costs an arm and a leg." This sounds scary, but don't worry. It just means something is very expensive. Emma and her husband Brian were looking at new fridges. One of them was very fancy and expensive. Brian looked at the price and said, "Wow, this fridge costs an arm and a leg." They both laughed and chose a cheaper one. So when you hear this phrase, it means the price is very high. You can use it when talking about shopping, services, or anything costly. Let's now explore get cold feet. This has nothing to do with the weather. It means someone becomes nervous or scared about doing something, often at the last minute. Here's a story. Richard and his wife Lisa planned to start a small family business. Everything was ready. But one night Richard said, "I'm not sure if this is a good idea." Lisa looked at him and said, "Are you getting cold feet?" Richard nodded and they talked more until he felt confident again. This phrase is often used before big changes like starting a job, moving, or beginning a new project. It's a way to say someone is unsure or afraid to move forward. Now one last one for this part. Go the extra mile. This means to do more than expected, to give extra effort. For example, Nancy was helping her neighbor with some gardening. Not only did she water the plants, but she also cleaned the garden tools and arranged the flowers beautifully. Her neighbor said, "You really went the extra mile. Thank you." This is a powerful phrase. When someone says you go the extra mile, it means you care and you work hard. It shows strong character and kindness. These expressions are part of natural English. Native speakers use them every day. And now, you can too. When you listen to real stories like these, you begin to feel more confident. You know what phrases mean, when to use them, and how to express yourself better in both speaking and writing. Let's continue. There are still more stories and phrases that will help you grow your skills step by step. Let's continue. This time, we're going to focus even more on how native English speakers talk in real life. Many learners feel nervous when they hear native speakers talk quickly or use phrases they haven't learned in school. But don't worry, the more you listen, the more your brain gets used to these patterns. You'll understand faster, and you'll be able to use them yourself when speaking or writing. Let's start with this useful expression. Pulling someone's leg. It sounds strange, but it actually means joking with someone in a friendly way. Here's a story. William and his wife Sophie were sitting in their kitchen. Sophie said, "I just saw a squirrel open the mailbox and take a letter." William looked shocked. Then Sophie laughed and said, "I'm just pulling your leg." William laughed too and said, "You really got me." So when someone says something funny or silly just to make you react, they might say, "I'm just pulling your leg," meaning it was a joke. This phrase is common in everyday conversations among friends or family. Now let's look at another phrase. Break the ice. It has nothing to do with real ice. It means to start a conversation, especially when people feel shy or don't know each other well. For example, Sarah started a new job. On her first day, she didn't know anyone. During lunch, her coworker Tom said, "Hi Sarah, do you like tea or coffee?" Sarah smiled and said, "Tea." That simple question helped her relax. Tom had broken the ice. So break the ice means to start talking in a friendly way, to help everyone feel more comfortable. It's great for meeting new people at work, in class, or in your neighborhood. Next, let's talk about under the weather. This means feeling sick, but usually not very serious. Let's say Daniel woke up feeling tired and had a sore throat. His wife Emma asked, "Are you okay?" Daniel said, "I think I'm a little under the weather today." Emma made him tea and told him to rest. So if you're feeling a bit sick or tired, you can say, "I'm under the weather." It's a soft way to say you don't feel your best. Here's another phrase. The ball is in your court. This comes from sports. But people use it in normal life. It means that it's your turn to make a decision or take action. For example, Olivia and her husband Ben were talking about buying a house. Olivia said, "We've seen all the options. The ball is in your court now, Ben." That meant she was waiting for him to decide. So when someone says the ball is in your court, it means now it's your time to choose or do something. Now let's move to bite the bullet. This means to do something difficult or unpleasant, even if you don't want to. Here's a story. Michael had a toothache for weeks but was afraid to visit the dentist. Finally, his wife Laura said, "You need to bite the bullet and go." Michael nodded and made an appointment. It wasn't easy, but he felt better afterward. So if there's something hard you need to do and you stop avoiding it, you're biting the bullet. Let's look at this next one. Call it a day. This means to stop working or to finish for now. For example, Rachel and Thomas were cleaning their house all morning. After a few hours, Thomas said, "I think we've done enough. Let's call it a day." Rachel agreed, and they sat down to rest. You can use call it a day when you're ready to stop what you're doing, work, studying, or any task. Now let's explore a blessing in disguise. This means something that looks bad at first but turns out to be good later. Here's a real-life story. Jane lost her job at a company she didn't like. At first, she was upset. But later, she found a better job that she truly enjoyed. She told her husband, losing that job was a blessing in disguise. So when something seems negative but brings a good result later, you can use this phrase. Another helpful expression is cut to the chase. It means to skip the extra details and go straight to the main point. Let's say David and his friend Andrew were discussing a problem. David was explaining all the small things, but Andrew said, "Can we cut to the chase? What's the real issue here?" David then explained the main problem clearly. You can use this when someone is talking too much or going off topic. It helps keep things clear and simple. Now let's look at get the hang of it. This means to learn how to do something after trying for a while. Emma was learning to ride a bicycle. At first she fell a few times, but after some practice she smiled and said to her husband James, "I think I'm getting the hang of it." So when you're learning something new and it starts to feel easier, that's when you get the hang of it. Let's talk about in hot water. This means being in trouble. For example, Mark forgot to pay the electricity bill. When his wife Anna found out, she said, "You're in hot water now." Mark quickly called the company and fixed the problem. So if someone makes a mistake and gets into trouble, you can say they're in hot water. Next is, let the cat out of the bag. It means to reveal a secret by mistake. Lucy was planning a surprise dinner for her husband Adam, but while talking to her friend, she accidentally told him about it. Adam heard and said, "So there's a surprise dinner? I guess you let the cat out of the bag." It's a fun way to talk about saying something you weren't supposed to share yet. Now let's look at back to square one. This means starting again from the beginning. Paul and his wife Emily were trying to fix a broken shelf. They thought they fixed it, but it broke again. Paul said, "Well, we're back to square one." They had to start over. This is useful when things don't work out and you need to begin again. Another one is speak of the devil. This is something people say when the person they're talking about appears at that moment. Let's say Lisa and her husband Brian were talking about their friend Sam. Suddenly, Sam walked into the room. Brian laughed and said, "Speak of the devil." It's not a bad thing. It's just a fun way to say, "We were just talking about you." Let's keep going with once in a blue moon. This means something that happens very rarely. Jessica and her husband David only go on long vacations every few years. One day Jessica said, "We should go on a trip soon. We only do this once in a blue moon." So when something happens not often, you can use this phrase. Now let's go with hit the nail on the head. It means to say something exactly right. James and his wife Lily were trying to understand why their car wouldn't start. Lily said, "Maybe the battery is old." James checked and said, "You hit the nail on the head. That's exactly the problem." This phrase is great when someone gives the perfect answer or finds the real reason. Let's try burning the midnight oil. It means staying up late to work or study. John was working on a report for his office. His wife Claire saw him at his desk at 1 a.m. and said, "You're burning the midnight oil again." This is often used when someone is working hard, especially late at night. Here's another one. Throw in the towel. It means to give up. For example, Ben was trying to fix the sink, but after 3 hours he looked at his wife Sarah and said, "I'm throwing in the towel. Let's call a plumber." You can use this when someone stops trying because it's too hard or not working. Let's continue even more in the next part with new phrases and more examples to help you understand native English speakers better every day. Let's continue. Now we'll go deeper into real-life expressions and stories to help you better understand how native English speakers talk in everyday conversations. Remember, the more you listen to these phrases used in natural ways, the easier it becomes to recognize them. And soon, you'll also be able to use them in your own speaking and writing. Let's keep going. Let's start with the expression, on the same page. This means two or more people agree on something or understand each other. Here's a real-life story. Andrew and his wife Helen were planning a family picnic. Andrew said, "Let's bring sandwiches and juice." Helen said, "I was thinking the same thing." Then Andrew smiled and said, "Good, we're on the same page." So when two people agree or have the same understanding, you can say they are on the same page. Next, let's talk about get cold feet. This phrase means feeling nervous or scared to do something, usually at the last minute. For example, Richard had a big presentation at work. He had prepared everything, but just before going up to speak, he told his coworker Emma, "I'm getting cold feet." Emma encouraged him and said, "You'll do great. Just breathe and take your time." Richard smiled and walked up to give his speech. In the end, he did really well. So if someone gets nervous before doing something important, they can say, "I'm getting cold feet." Let's look at another common phrase, in the same boat. This means that two or more people are in the same situation, especially a difficult one. Here's a story. Rebecca and James both lost their jobs during a company cut. They met for coffee and talked about their worries. James said, "I feel so uncertain." Rebecca replied, "You're not alone. We're in the same boat." That made both of them feel better, knowing they were not the only ones going through it. This phrase is helpful when you want to show support or remind someone that others are facing similar problems. Now let's move to cost an arm and a leg. This phrase means something is very expensive. For example, Peter and his wife Susan were looking at new furniture. Susan saw a beautiful sofa and said, "I love this one." Peter looked at the price tag and said, "It costs an arm and a leg." They both laughed and decided to look for a cheaper option. So when something is too expensive, you can say, "It costs an arm and a leg." Next up is take it with a grain of salt. This means to not believe something completely or to be careful when trusting what someone says. Let's say Olivia tells her friend Daniel, "Tom said he ran 20 kilometers in 1 hour." Daniel smiles and says, "I'll take that with a grain of salt." That means Daniel isn't sure if Tom is telling the full truth. So when someone tells you something that sounds too good or maybe not 100% true, you can say, take it with a grain of salt. Here's another one. Hit the books. This means to start studying seriously. For example, Claire was talking to her son, Ethan. She said, "Your exams are coming. It's time to hit the books." Ethan nodded and went to his room to study. This is a good way to say someone needs to focus on studying. Now let's learn about give someone a hand. This means to help someone. Here's a story. Emily was trying to carry 3 heavy bags of groceries. Her neighbor George saw her and said, "Let me give you a hand." He helped carry the bags to her door. Emily smiled and said, "Thank you, George." This phrase is used often when offering or asking for help. Next is, go the extra mile. It means to do more than what is expected. Let's say Sarah is a nurse. One day, a patient was feeling nervous. Sarah stayed with her longer, explained everything clearly, and made her feel calm. Her coworker Anna said, "You always go the extra mile for your patients." That means Sarah puts in more effort than required. You can use this when someone does extra work to help or improve something. Let's now explore keep an eye on. This means to watch something or someone carefully. David and his wife Rachel were cooking. Rachel said, "I need to go check the laundry. Can you keep an eye on the soup?" David said, "Sure." So if you ask someone to watch something for a moment, you can say, keep an eye on it. Here's a new one. Run into someone. This means to meet someone by chance, without planning. Here's a real-life story. Michael went to the market and ran into his old friend Henry. They were both surprised and happy. Henry said, "Wow, I didn't expect to see you here." Michael laughed and said, "I just ran into you." So when you meet someone unexpectedly, use run into. Let's look at cut corners. It means to do something quickly and not carefully, often to save time or money. For example, Thomas was building a wooden shelf. He didn't measure the pieces correctly because he wanted to finish fast. His wife Lisa looked at the shelf and said, "It looks weak. Did you cut corners?" Thomas said, "Yes, and now I'll have to do it again." So if someone does something the easy way and the result isn't good, we say they cut corners. Now let's go to face the music. This means to accept the result of something you've done, even if it's bad. Here's a story. Ben forgot to send an important email at work. His manager found out. Ben said, "I made a mistake. I'll face the music." He explained what happened and promised to fix it. So when someone admits a mistake and deals with the results, they are facing the music. Next is, throw someone under the bus. This means to blame someone else to protect yourself. Let's say Hannah and Jake were working on a school project. When the teacher asked why it was late, Jake said, "Hannah didn't finish her part." Hannah was shocked. Later, she told her brother, "Jake threw me under the bus." So when someone blames another person unfairly, this phrase is used. Let's also talk about in over your head. It means to be in a situation that's too difficult. Paul got a new job managing a big team. After 1 week, he told his wife Laura, "This is harder than I thought. I think I'm in over my head." Laura said, "Don't worry. You'll learn, step by step." This is useful when you feel something is too much to handle right now. Now let's explore by the book. This means doing everything strictly according to rules. For example, Olivia was driving with her husband John. She stopped at every sign and followed every rule. John smiled and said, "You really drive by the book," Olivia said. "Better safe than sorry." This phrase is helpful when describing someone who follows rules exactly. Let's keep learning. Here's another phrase, out of the blue. This means something happens suddenly, without warning. One day, Sophie got a message from an old school friend she hadn't talked to in 10 years. She told her husband Matthew, "He texted me out of the blue." It was unexpected. So when something happens suddenly, you can say, "It came out of the blue." We'll continue in the next part with more useful phrases, examples, and simple stories to help you understand how native speakers talk and how you can become more Let's keep going. You're doing great by listening and learning through real stories and everyday phrases. As we continue, remember, each time you listen and understand how these phrases are used in real situations, your listening and writing will get stronger. These stories will help you connect words to meaning and help you feel more confident when speaking with native English speakers. Now let's explore more common phrases and expressions used by native speakers. Let's begin with this expression, break the ice. This means to start a conversation in a relaxed way, especially when people feel shy or uncomfortable. Here's a real-life example. Claire was starting a new job. On her first day, she didn't know anyone. During lunch, one of her co-workers, James, came over and said, "Hi, I'm James. Where did you work before this?" Claire smiled and felt more relaxed. That simple question helped break the ice. So if you want to start a conversation in a friendly way, especially with someone new, you can say, "I tried to break the ice." Now let's talk about the phrase, pull yourself together. This means to calm down and take control of your emotions. Let's say Rachel was feeling upset after she lost her phone. She was crying and feeling stressed. Her husband Thomas said gently, "Rachel, take a deep breath and pull yourself together. Let's think where you saw it last." Rachel calmed down and started thinking more clearly. A few minutes later, she remembered she had left it in the car. So when someone is upset or confused, and you want to help them calm down, you can say, pull yourself together. Next we have, speak of the devil. This phrase is used when someone you're talking about suddenly appears. For example, Mark and his wife Lily were at home talking about their neighbor Daniel. Mark said, "Daniel hasn't visited us in a while." At that exact moment, the doorbell rang. Lily opened the door and said, "Speak of the devil, it's Daniel." It's a light and fun way to say, "We were just talking about you." Now let's learn under the weather. This means someone is not feeling well. Maybe they have a cold or just feel sick. One morning, Olivia woke up feeling tired and her head was hurting. Her husband George noticed and asked, "Are you okay?" Olivia replied, "I think I'm a little under the weather today." George made her some tea and told her to rest. So when you're not feeling well, you can say, "I'm feeling under the weather." Here's another useful one. The ball is in your court. This means it's your turn to make a decision or take action. Let's say David wanted to buy a new house, but he wasn't sure. The seller gave him a good price and said, "Let me know tomorrow." David's wife Emma told him, "Now the ball is in your court." That means it was David's turn to decide what to do next. Now let's learn bite off more than you can chew. This means to take on more work than you can handle. For example, Jason agreed to help 3 neighbors fix their garden and also promised to paint his own house. After 2 days, he felt tired and couldn't keep up. His wife Sarah said, "You bit off more than you could chew." Jason agreed and said, "Next time I'll do one job at a time." This is a good phrase to describe when someone tries to do too much at once. Let's move to let the cat out of the bag. This means to reveal a secret by accident. For instance, Emma was planning a surprise birthday party for her husband. Her son Max was excited and told his father, "I can't wait for your party tomorrow." Emma looked at him and said, "Max, you let the cat out of the bag." The surprise was no longer a secret. So when someone tells a secret by mistake, we say they let the cat out of the bag. Here's a helpful phrase. Get something off your chest. This means to talk about something that's been bothering you. One day, Henry was quiet at dinner. His wife Laura asked, "Is everything okay?" Henry said, "I've been worried about my job. I needed to get that off my chest." Laura listened and gave him some advice. This phrase is useful when someone wants to share a worry or a feeling that's been on their mind. Next, we have once in a blue moon. This means something happens very rarely. For example, Daniel and his wife Rebecca don't go out for dinner very often. One evening, Daniel said, "Let's go to that nice restaurant tonight." Rebecca smiled and said, "Wow, that happens once in a blue moon." They both enjoyed their special dinner. You can use this phrase when something doesn't happen often. Now let's look at burn the midnight oil. This means to stay up late working or studying. For instance, Claire was writing a long report for work. Her husband Matthew saw her still typing at midnight. He asked, "Still working?" Claire said, "Yes, I have to finish this tonight. I'm burning the midnight oil." This phrase is useful when talking about hard work done late at night. Let's also explore hit the nail on the head. This means to say something that is exactly right. For example, Thomas and Emily were discussing why their garden plants were not growing. Emily said, "Maybe the soil is too dry." Thomas replied, "You hit the nail on the head. I haven't watered them in days." This phrase is often used to praise someone who gave the correct answer or idea. Next is miss the boat. This means to miss an opportunity. Let's say Andrew wanted to buy a new laptop. There was a big discount last week, but he waited too long. When he checked again, the discount was gone. His wife Helen said, "Looks like you missed the boat." This phrase is common when someone waited too long and lost a good chance. Let's learn go back to the drawing board. This means to start again after a plan fails. For instance, Peter and Rachel were building a birdhouse. It fell apart. Rachel said, "We need to go back to the drawing board." That means they needed to make a new plan and try again. This phrase is great when a plan doesn't work and you need to restart. Now we'll talk about jump to conclusions. This means to decide something quickly without all the facts. One evening, Sarah came home and saw her husband Jack cleaning the kitchen. She said, "Did something go wrong?" Jack replied, "No, I just wanted to help." Sarah smiled and said, "Sorry, I jumped to conclusions." This phrase reminds us not to assume too fast. Let's learn sit tight. This means to wait patiently. For example, Michael and Olivia were waiting for the doctor to call. Olivia asked, "Should we call again?" Michael replied, "Let's sit tight and wait a bit longer." So when you want someone to be patient and wait, say, sit tight. Now we'll learn call it a day. This means to stop working for now. Mark was painting his fence. It was getting dark. His wife Lily said, "Let's call it a day and finish tomorrow." Mark agreed and packed up the tools. This is a simple way to say, let's stop working for now. Let's now explore, throw in the towel. This means to give up or stop trying. One day, Emma was trying to bake bread. After 3 failed tries, she told her husband Daniel, "I'm throwing in the towel. Let's just buy bread from the bakery." Daniel said, "You did your best." This phrase is used when someone decides to stop because it's too hard or not working.